Hello, everybody. My name is Leah, and I am a former TA here at LSAT Unplugged. This evening, I have the honor of serving our guest tonight, Joseph Matthews, who is the Student Recruitment Director at the University of Miami Law School. So welcome, Joseph. Thank you so much for being here. So just a little bit about Joseph to tell you why he's qualified to give us all the details here on all things admissions and LSAT. He is licensed to practice in Florida, as Mr. Matthews has earned his bachelor's from Florida State University and his Juris Doctor from the University of Miami School of Law. Currently, Mr. Matthews is the Director of Student Recruitment for the law school, and he joined Miami Law as the Academic and Student Services Fellow and Lecturer for the White and Case International Arbitration LLM program, where he coached the Frankfurt Investment Arbitration Moot Court team. He's dedicated to several leadership positions with the Florida Bar, Law School Admissions Council, and the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of South Florida. So again, thank you so much, Joseph, for being here with us. I know that right off the bat, if I was taking the LSAT again, I would want to know a little bit more about your involvement with the Law School Admissions Council.
Of course. I'm here to help. So, you want to go over I'm sorry. All right. Okay. So yes, I am involved with the Law School Admissions Council, and I specifically work with committees that work in the irregularities and misconducts from the LSAT testing. So when you are taking the LSAT test, right now it's digital. And so there are a lot of precautions in place to make sure that it's actually the right person taking the test and they're, following all the terms and conditions that apply. So I'm part of a committee that reviews any type of potential misconduct.
Okay. I did personally take the LSAT virtually, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm not sure how long is that LSAT still going to be virtual. Did they pick a date where it's going to be in person again?
As far as I know, it's virtual until they say otherwise, but I don't think there's going to be a big change anytime soon.
Okay, interesting. Well, Joseph, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to admissions in the first place?
Sure. I think I had a non-traditional path to admissions, but I was after undergrad, I had about 8 years of experience working as a chef in different restaurants, and I kind of got over that. I kind of wanted to find a job that was a little bit more 9 to 5, where I didn't work 7 days a week and all throughout the hours and all holidays. So I said, you know what, let me try something different. So I, in a lark, applied to law school, got in after I took the LSAT several times. And I did not do what your great students are doing right now, which is getting, really involved and informed. I, kind of went on my own accord and kind of traveled the areas on my own. So when I got into law school, I was super excited, didn't know anything. And I was successful in law school, and I had the opportunity to come back and to lecture and to work with different institutes. And I kind of found that was my path and calling. And I realized I wish I had someone to go to and kind of meet and talk about my journey and finding out which is the best program for me. And that's what I like to do now. So admissions is the perfect thing for me. And like restaurants, it's very dynamic and changing, and I always have to be on my feet and traveling around. So it kind of feels like my old job, but with a lot more stability and to me, a lot more excitement.
Sure. It's funny that you reference the restaurant business, as I, during undergrad, was a server and a bartender, and I know exactly what you mean of working, 4 o'clock in the afternoon until whatever time. Right. And when you're off, everyone else is working, and when they're off, you're working. So I completely understand wanting a little bit more structure in your day-to-day job, but that is a very non-traditional story. I loved it though. I loved it. So there was something, oh gosh, you said something that really sparked. I just love that it's full circle for you of coming back. And I think that a lot of the legal profession is wanting to give to others and wanting to pass on information, I should say. And as I'm sitting in law school right now, right, in my first month of law school, I just keep thinking to myself about how all my professors have all gone and practiced and done other occupations and come back and went to law school, and now they're here. And some of them, had really great positions and have come and decided to be a professor. And, you sit there in the economic aspect of it and you wonder, like, why would you do that, right? But I just think it's such a fulfilling position from what I see, as I go to class every day. And it's something that I'm not even through law school yet, and I already know that at some point in my career I want to do. So I'm sure that that's how you feel with your job, is it's just so fulfilling.
No, of course. And that's the backbone of being an attorney, whether you're practicing or not. You're an advocate and you're advocating for others in some way, some shape. And yes, you could advocate for big businesses and get lots of money, but you can also advocate for people that don't have a voice for themselves. And there's a lot of roles that you can get. That's, I think, in the beauty of law school, is that you are not going to be pigeonholed into one type of career. You can do anything with it, and you can be very successful whether you're practicing or non-practicing.
Yes, and to piggyback off of that, so many people have been like, "Oh, what kind of law do you want to practice?" And I might have an idea, right? But who knows in the next 3 years how that could change. But I love answering that question, because people assume it's like, oh, you want to go to criminal law, you stick with it forever. And it's not like medical school or being a doctor where you study for this specialty, and if you change it, it's going to take you a really long time to figure something new out, right? You have to study all over again. And with law, of course, you specialize and then you move to a different specialty, but it's not as difficult, right? You already learned the basics of it, and now you just have to get reacquainted. And I think that that's another thing that's really cool about becoming an attorney, is that you're not stuck. You're right. You're not pigeonholed anywhere. Well, great. So can you tell us, just to, go off of your background, and I know we've talked about some of, the most rewarding parts, but is there a most challenging part about being an admissions officer for you?
Well, certainly. I think the most challenging thing is you can't offer everybody admission, and you meet people every single day in this job with people that are phenomenal candidates for law, and they are going to be a great leader or attorney or anything like that at some point, but there's limited seats. So choosing who your school can offer admission to is a very tricky thing. And you obviously meet people that you want to just see go to the moon and back. But sometimes you're just not in a position to offer them that for that year. So being selective with who is offered a seat in each law school is a very tough position that committees have. And we are human, and it appears that it's very robotic, and who gets in and who doesn't, and that is not the case. It is a very holistic process, and to me, that's the hardest thing, is you really get to know people very, very well. And sometimes you have to say that this just isn't going to be the path for you. So that's the hardest thing for me.
Yeah, but I want to point out a positive thing about what you said there, and that it's not a robotic process. And I know that I had this false sense of believing that it was, right? If my LSAT score wasn't this, if my GPA wasn't this, if this wasn't this, right, I had no shot. And that it was like a funnel effect. And if I didn't have this, and this to make it through to the bottom, to actually get into the list of people that get in, seemed really difficult. And I think that it wasn't until I got acceptances and I maybe got on some wait lists that I was like, you know what, maybe it's not exactly like that. And then that was reaffirmed as I started doing these interviews, where everyone seems to say it's not it's not like that, right? Some people look at the personal statements and all the optional essays first before they even look at the transcript. and then narrow down from there. Right now I'm looking at your transcript, now I'm looking at your LSAT score, but I've already read your personal statement, I've already read the optional essays, I've already read the letters of recommendation. So now I kind of know who you are before I get to the nitty gritty, right? Is your process similar to that? Do you have a process when you look at an application?
Oh, certainly. So, I mean, we look at everything. So, thousands of people apply to each school each year. And it's not just choosing who has the best LSAT, who has the best GPA. I wish it was that easy, because then it would be a grid and I probably could just click and do a Excel sheet formula and it'd be very easy. But instead, we read everything that's submitted, the personal statement, the LSAT writing sample, your transcript history, any addendum that you're submitting. We look at all that stuff very closely, and it can be a very tricky thing because everyone is very different. And how do you compare one person that has one set of experiences to another person that's from a completely different walk of life, who's had their own perspectives and diverse experiences? So you can't compare applicants to each other, but what you can do is look at your class as a whole, and this is where it gets tricky, and say, okay, well, what kind of perspectives and strengths are we missing? What interests in law are we missing? Those types of things are hard to really quantify, and you have to really look and dig deep into an application to get those things. So the review process is very, and that's why it takes so long. It's a very in-depth process where we're taking very strong notes, and then we're making suggestions to the committee, and then the committee is discussing it. So it's a very drawn out process, but for a reason. And the reason being is we want the strongest, most diverse, most interesting class that you possibly can get, so that the classroom is very interesting. Because if you go into a law school and everyone has the same experiences, the classroom is going to be very boring, because the conversation and the discussion is going to be all the same. But you want a class with a lot of different opinions and experiences. And so that's hard to get by just on an LSAT alone. You can't. You have to look at everything else, like the personal statement, resume, and everything.
Sure. And I love what you just said about, what's fostered in the classroom depends on the students in the classroom, and the variation of discussion and opinion. And that is, as someone who's been in law school for the past couple of weeks, I can say that, when everyone agrees, it's not that interesting. But when everyone, kind of adds a different viewpoint or a different perspective or a different opinion on a subject and maybe a different way of thinking about it, they may or may not change other people's minds, right? I think that that's what's so great about law school, and something that I've appreciated, and that we don't all think the same or have the same process of evaluating a situation. So I think I've never had anyone say what you just said, but I really appreciate it, because in practice it is so true. And I think that, some people think that, oh, if I go to this school, everyone's going to think this way, or if I go to this, and that's just not true.
Exactly. And honestly,
So
it's about
you spoke
challenging
about,
yourself.
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You can go on.
No worries.
You said something about strong candidates. So what does it take to stand out as a strong or especially talented candidate in your eyes?
Well, that depends on the candidate. So if you're, for example, a traditional applicant coming straight out of undergrad, right? We don't expect you to have a huge resume where you've worked at NASA, you've worked 10 years at an accounting firm, you've held leadership roles in this company or that. It's just not possible because your focus is undergrad. So, it depends on who that applicant is and what they should probably be submitting. So if they're an older applicant, fantastic. What we're going to look for is, what have you done professionally? What have you been able to succeed in? Does your LSAT score, does your GPA from undergrad match the strengths that you've showcased in your professional life? If you're younger and you're straight from undergrad, well, what was your GPA? What did you get involved with in student organizations? Did you do service projects? Those types of things. So everyone's going to have a different strength. It could be none of those things. It could be you're an international applicant. or you're an applicant that came with lots of obstacles that you overcame. Well, how did you overcome those obstacles and how did that change you? And so everything like that is very specific to the individual type of applicant. So again, you can't really compare, or I can't, well, you can't expect a certain strength from an apple if they're a pear, right? So you're trying to match what would you expect from this type of applicant. And it could be that there's no way for you to demonstrate those types of strengths. So what you're looking for is, do they have the potential to demonstrate those strengths in the law school environment? And that can be gleaned from the letters of recommendation or other types of things, maybe an interview that the school does with you. So it's a whole range of things. And I think the strengths that a lot of people kind of latch on to are those quantitative things, right? The LSAT, the GPA, their age, things that are numbers, because that's an easy thing to quantify as your strength. But there's a lot of soft strengths too that are just as important, like your resume, professional experiences, advocacy, and those types of things.
So you kind of answered my next question to an extent, but I'm going to ask anyways. Does a well-written admissions essay make up for a lower LSAT score? And if not, what does?
Yes and no. It can't make up for a low LSAT score. It can explain a lower LSAT score, and it can give a lot more background to why the score is what it is. In the end of the day, the school is going to want to have the strongest candidates possible, and that might mean they want you to be close to their median LSAT score for that incoming class. But there's exceptions to the rules, and those things can be explained, and I think help an admissions committee overlook maybe some of the pitfalls of an LSAT score history if you have certain things in your personal statement. And again, it could be an obstacle that you're actively trying to overcome as you're trying to prepare for the LSAT. I mean, the pandemic hit. There was a lot of things going on in the world. Maybe you're in the Ukraine and you don't have the ability to study as much because you're going through a armed conflicts. So everyone can be putting those types of things in their personal statement to give a committee a little more background about why the LSAT is not indicative to their potential for performance in law school.
So you suggest that in an addenda?
It depends. I always like to say your personal statement should highlight the best about you, why you're going to be the best, why or why you want to be the best, why you're going to be a great candidate for that law school. Maybe it's not the best place for you to talk about your weaknesses. It's like going on a date and you have 2 minutes to say, this is why we should go on the second date. You shouldn't be talking about all the wrong things about you. You should be talking about the things that we want to get to know more about. So start off on a good footing. Talk about your strengths and what makes you unique, or whatever the question is, or that prompt of the law school that's asking. And then if you need to explain a weakness in your whatever if it's your LSAT or GPA or something, maybe that's better placed in a narrative of an addenda. But it can, maybe talking about it in your personal statement makes sense because that's what you're talking about in your personal statement. Maybe your strength is your ability to overcome obstacles and your low LSAT score is part of that. So maybe it makes sense to put it there. But I'm always of the opinion that you should talk about what you want us to know about you first, and then the addendum can kind of highlight and explain more of things that you want to explain on a lesser light.
Okay. Yeah. I've never heard it put that way, but the date thing that you added in there, that's really smart. I wish that I could have relayed that to my students whenever I was teaching, because I used to get a lot of questions about it and of what to put in my personal statement, right? It's that big jarring question of what do I write my personal statement about? And I was like, well, that's different for everyone. Right. It's not like it has to be about one thing. We're all different. No two peoples are going to be the same. And I wish that I could have put your date analogy in there because I really like that. I really like that. And it's a really smart way to think about it.
Right. I mean, we're all asking you, tell us about yourself. We might be asking you, tell us about yourself and why you want to go to blank or why you want to practice blank, but we want to know more about you. So if we say, right. Tell me more about yourself. You're like, well, I'm allergic to seafood. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. That'll be helpful for planning your events, but let's talk more about the positives, and again, that's not going to work for everybody,
Right.
but I think it's a good way to start the process of thinking, what should I write about? And then if you go beyond that, that's fine. But first think about what you want us to get from your personal statement first. What is the end goal?
Sure. I always explained that because there aren't interviews that often anymore, if really at all. I think I only applied to one or two schools that had an interview that was optional, I believe, unless you were early decision. But irregardless, I said, these people are never going to meet you until you're in or you go on a tour. So what do you want them to know about you from this piece of paper that they're reading?
Mhm.
What message do you want to get across? And like mine, I said, like, I wanted to feel like a radiant, like ray of sunshine on this piece of paper. So I wrote about something really positive, and, that was mine. Other people, have these situations that led them to want to be a lawyer that maybe result or came out of something that was, negatively impacted their life. Like, that still shows a lot of passion in what they want to do.
Exactly.
And I was like, every story is not the same. But just because you don't have this like epiphany of why you want to go to law school doesn't mean you have nothing to write about.
Exactly.
So, Joe, how early do you think an applicant should consider preparing for admissions?
Well, in the best case scenario, it should really be 2 years before you intend to apply, because you want to prepare for the LSAT and you want to apply early. So in order to apply early, you have to give yourself enough time to prepare for the LSAT. So it depends on the individual, but let's say you want to give yourself at least 6 months before when you start, your LSAT to study, and maybe it takes much less time than that or more, but give yourself at least 6 months to start preparing, figuring out which program you want to use to prepare for the LSAT. And you also want to give yourself enough time to retake the LSAT if necessary, right? So if you give yourself 2 years, that's 6 months to get yourself in the zone, right? I'm getting ready to apply. I'm putting my recommenders on notice. I'm going to start thinking about my personal statement. I'm going to start researching law schools that I want to apply to. Then 6 months to prepare for the LSAT and take the LSAT. And then that's 12 months. You want to apply for law school right at the start of the process. And most law schools open up their application around anywhere from 10 to 12 months before the next fall. So for Miami, for example, it's September 1st, prior to the start date of the next year. So if you want to apply September 1st, that means you're probably taking the LSAT over the summer. That means you're preparing for the LSAT around January of the previous year. And, the September before that, you're starting to get yourself really ready to start applying for law school. But that's best case scenario. Other people don't have that, that grace, but if you can, give yourself at least 18 months.
Yeah, and I can attest to that, as I was a shotgun, take the LSAT, apply in the 11th hour, and all of guilty. I also did not, and before I joined LSAT Unplugged, also did not have great guidance whatsoever in navigating studying for the LSAT, or, preparing for admissions, and how much everything costs,
Mhm.
how much applications cost, and all of that jazz. So I love that, you said that early, because to stay relaxed and not be stressed about really any of it, to give yourself the best shot at getting the most scholarship money, to give yourself the best shot at getting into the schools that you want to get into, the earlier, the better. I know that I've had individuals say, before the new year, or before the, their not primary deadline.
Priority
What
deadline.
is the word? Yeah, yeah. So before that deadline is best. So do you agree? Do you agree with that? If it's
Oh,
not
certainly.
right, like September 1st
No,
before.
100%. Yeah, the majority of law schools like Miami, we do rolling admission. So as applications come in, we start accepting and filling up seats. And as we saw in the past few cycles, those seats fill up very quickly. It used to be that there was a little bit more of an easier pattern. So many people were applying each month. The schools knew that. But in the previous few cycles, a lot of people had nothing to do because they were home doing nothing. So they were preparing earlier. They were taking the LSAT more often. They had the time to prepare themselves to apply early. There were less distractions going on. So there was a lot more applications coming in early. So the seats were filling up quicker. So who knows if that pattern is going to stay? But regardless, you want to be in that process of getting in early, because again, as you said, if you want scholarship consideration, you want the best scholarship consideration, you need to apply early when there's scholarship funding. And typically those funds, they start, drying up by, I would say, end of winter.
Sure. Let's see. I was going to ask about COVID, but we're not going to ask about COVID. we're gonna forgo conversations about COVID. We're going to hope that we're on the up and up and that doesn't become an issue again. If a student is nervous to reach out to an admissions office, just to ask any questions, to maybe gather some more information, do you have any advice for them on maybe how to calm those nerves?
Well, you're going to have to bite the bullet. I can't stress how important it is to put yourself before the admissions offices of the schools you're interested in. I mean, that is my entire job. My entire job is to go out, meet people, and tell them to come here or to apply, or tell them, why Miami is great. I mean, that is basically what we do. It's very different than other types of graduate programs. In law school, since you want such a diverse, incoming class with interests and everything, you have to go out there and try to bring them in. So you have to travel around the United States and internationally and meet with people. You want people to come to the school and go to events and talk to you and stuff. Because again, as you mentioned before, most schools don't require interviews to get into law school. So what that means is that doesn't mean we don't want to meet you. Really what that means is it's impossible to do interviews with everyone that applies because there's just so many applicants. So if you put yourself in the position to show that gumption and that initiative to go out and meet with us, I think that's very valuable. I mean, personally, if I see two candidates and one candidate has called us, gone to an event, met me in Wisconsin, gone out of their way to learn more about our program, well, I think that's going to be more of a bona fide applicant, an applicant that might do better at our program because they're more informed about our program than someone who has never met with us, that has never gone to our school. So those types of things do matter because we learn more about you, and we learn more about your potential as a great candidate for our school. So knowing that, you need to put yourself in that position. Being an attorney, whether you're practicing or not, means that you're going to have to be in front of people and talking to them, because that is your role. You're an advocate for other people, like I mentioned before. So you have to learn to challenge yourself, put yourself in the best position, and first learn to advocate for yourself before you're going to be in a position to advocate for others. So go out, talk to us, call us, email us, do virtuals, do anything, but make sure that you put yourself in a position that we get to know you.
Absolutely. And I love that you compared it as, you're advocating for yourself to get into law school, just as in your career, you're going to be advocating for others. So you might as well start now. And that's a skill that you're going to need to have. So again, start practicing now. And if you're at the bare minimum, just emailing an admissions committee, I just want to know, be pleasant. I think that sometimes individuals get wrapped up with things being stressful. It might be, a time constraint on something that you need to know the answer to get your application in. Just remember to be pleasant, because you never know. It could be the dean reading your email. You have no idea who's reading and responding to what you've sent, or if you call on the phone, you have no idea who's answering. I actually just last week interviewed the dean from University Louisville, which I had applied to and gotten, a call from on the phone and had no idea at the time, right, who he was. And so it was fun that, we got on Zoom the other day and we were like, I think I know you. But saying like, I had no idea he was the dean, right? And that's who I got a call from. And of course I was pleasant, but imagine answering and not being pleasant, right? Then I probably wouldn't have gotten off the wait list or wouldn't have gotten in or wouldn't have gotten the offer that I did, given that I wasn't that way. So just a word to the wise of you never know who you're talking to. So always err on the side of caution, regardless of how stressed out you are.
I can't agree more.
So do you have any thoughts or predictions on this next admission cycle?
Well, the past two have been pretty brutal. So my prediction is that it's going to be better. My prediction is it's going to, I think, be a little bit more easier for the applicants because we're, I think, over that pandemic hump where there was a big influx of applications coming in, and that's great for applicants and for law schools too. So it really, I think, is going to be a better year because also there's been so many more opportunities to learn about how to make your application better. Things like this didn't exist before. I mean, they were in-person events and there were a few podcasts here and there and blogs, but they weren't the level of virtual events where you had the accessibility to learn about different schools. So now I think applicants are in a better position to get informed in a healthier way about the schools. So they're going to be applying to less schools, which is great. They're not going to be just applying to every school. They'll have more of an ability to choose and pinpoint which schools are best fit for them. And I think, again, because the LSAT is being offered right now at home, and I think it's still going to be a great incentive for people to take the LSAT and prepare for it in a place that they're comfortable so that you have the opportunity to really make yourself a competitive applicant for a lot of schools. So I think it's going to be a much easier application cycle because, again, even from 2 years ago, we had a lot of applicants that were rolling over from the previous cycle. So they were like, I don't want to start law school in the middle of a pandemic or the start of a pandemic. So they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I think last year was the tail end of that, where applicants were at the end of their waiting cycle. And this cycle is going to be a lot more of a traditional cycle with new applicants instead of a big pool of people that were waiting from the previous ones.
Yeah, I know that I personally took a year off because I didn't want to go to law school in the middle of a pandemic, as half of my, undergraduate career was completed from my apartment. I didn't want to have to do that again. So I, was part of that statistic, you could say. And I hear people say that, I think next year might be a little bit easier. I'm like, I would love to know, had I waited another year, how it would have worked out for me, but I can't complain. I can't complain with where I ended up.
Yeah, full disclosure, I said the same thing last year, so I was completely wrong. But I'm hoping I'm not going to avoid. This is a different cycle.
I guess we'll have to wait and see, right? So the burning question that a lot of students have is, how do I know that I'm the right fit? And I know a lot of first-year law students will talk about the imposter syndrome. Is there such a thing as a right fit student?
Well, imposter syndrome is real. And I think everyone suffers from it. I also think because everyone suffers from it, it's not a real thing. That's just life. I think law school, you're going to feel like an imposter because no one starts law school ready for law school. You could have your entire family could be lawyers. Your dog could be a lawyer, and you're just not going to be ready for law school. So no matter what, by default, everyone sitting in that class is kind of an imposter because they have no idea what they're doing. So I think that's a silver lining, is that everyone is in the same position. But by the end of law school, I guarantee you no one's going to be an imposter, because that's what law school does, is it prepares you. But you're correct. How do you choose the best program for you? There's so many different programs, so many different cultures of schools. And That's the hardest thing. And that, I think, is what people don't realize that they're going to face when they're choosing the law school. So I'm sure you were in the same position I was. You finally get into a bunch of schools. You're like, oh my God, awesome. I got into schools I wanted to get in. But then reality sinks in that you have to choose one of them. And choosing one is really, really hard. So you're not going to know whether that school is the right fit for you unless you make the effort to go out, sit in a class, talk to the law students and the faculty and the administrators, go and actually witness what it's like in a day in that program. And again, that's very hard for everyone to do because not everyone has the means to travel across the United States. But if you choose your top 2 or 3 programs and go to the admitted, student days, the law days that they do in the spring, and maybe do a virtual class visit if you can. I think that's very, very important. Asking the right questions is really important too. And what the right questions are is, I think the right questions are, what's it like at your law school for the students? Are they happy? Do they enjoy being there? What's the outcomes of going to that law school? And you're not going to know that unless you ask. And asking both people like myself, both the current students and the alumni and the faculty are going to give you the answers, because no one's going to lie to you when you're choosing that kind of thing. No one's going to tell you that it's one way just to lie to you and pull the rug under you when you start here, because that's just not going to create a happy law class. So go out there and don't be afraid to ask the questions and visit the schools if you can.
I think that's even more to your point of, try and take the LSAT and do all the things early. I think that you and I were probably in a similar boat where we got into schools and then we were on wait lists, and then you get off the wait list. And when you get off the wait list, you've got like 2 days to
Correct.
Not only verbally say, I want to go here, but 2 days to pay your seat deposit, which, not everyone has the means to just be whipping out however much money that seat deposit is, like within 2 days notice, right? So I think that, if it's apply to schools and then immediately after you apply, go pursue these opportunities of seeing what it's like and seeing the area. I know that for me, it wasn't only about the school and what the school was like, but also the area, right, of where the school was, and outside of the school, the city itself. Give yourself time to explore those, because you might knock a few off your list and be like, oh, that's just not for me. Or,
Exactly.
oh, I really liked this one and I didn't think that I would. I can tell you right now that the school that I went to was not the school that I'm going to now, was not my first choice. And now, as 3 weeks have gone by, I'm like, you know what? This was absolutely the right choice for me. Aside from my very nice scholarship, it's the right choice. And I understand why this is where I ended up needing to be, right? So even those things, keep your mind open to those, I guess, is also my point here of
No,
don't
100%.
knock
I can't agree
everything.
more. And
Give
you
it a
can't,
fair
like you
shot
said,
either.
you can't get those opportunities unless you really start the process early. And I call it the smell test.
Right.
Back from restaurants, sometimes you go to a restaurant and you're like, what's that smell? And you walk out. The same thing for law schools. You go to a campus, you're like all excited, and you're like, man, why does it feel so oppressive here? Oh, why does everyone look so like they hate their lives? Oh my gosh, is this gonna be my life for 3 years? You want to go somewhere where you're going to feel comfortable, because if you're not comfortable,
Right.
you're not going to succeed academically, because you're just not going to be happy. So you have to go and you have to explore and you have to choose the right program for you. And you're not going to know that based off of rankings alone, or whether or not that city has the best restaurants or not. You're going to only know that by going to the campus, exploring it, and talking to people around you and seeing whether this is the family you want for the next 3 years.
Exactly. So before we wrap up, my final question is, do you have any admissions tips for maybe some non-traditional students? And by non-traditional, not only do I mean, students who maybe have been out of school for a few years and have already been in the workforce, but also students who may be looking to transfer. Do you have any tips for them and what that process looks like and how that differs, from their original application process?
Well, I think it's a great question. And the answer is very easily, you just need to come and talk to us, because we can answer all of your questions. This is not the type of office, an admissions office at a law school is not the type of office to transfer you somewhere else. We are a one-stop shop for our law school so that we can give the right answer, because we have to get the answers to you so you have enough time to make a decision. So if you're a non-traditional student, like for example, you're a transfer student, I think it's a great example, you need to call the schools, because each school is going to have completely different transfer requirements. Some schools have a 3.0 GPA requirement. Some say you don't have to give letters of recommendation. Some require it. There's timing issues. So each school is very different in those types of things. And the same thing could be said about a non-traditional student who's, they've been in the workforce for 25 years. Well, how do you best overcome a GPA that was 25 years ago? That is not, again, doesn't reflect all the great things that you've done since then. Talking to us can help you, focus on what's important so that an admissions committee doesn't accidentally overlook those types of things, because not every committee is the same. Some committees move very quick and they overlook those types of things, unless you kind of point it out to them. So you want to be able to figure out for each school what's the best way to get in front of the gaze of the committee in the best way. And the answers might be a little bit different for each school, but talking to us will give you the answers right then and there.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Joseph. This has been so informational, even for me. And I know that our students greatly appreciate it. If they have any more questions for you or want to know anything specifically about the University of Miami, how can they reach you?
Oh, the easiest thing is just go onto our website, law.miami.edu, and you'll see there's an admissions page. I'm on there. My entire office and all my colleagues are on there. You can make virtual events. You can come visit classes. You can go to all of our events. We travel across the United States to all the cities that you're probably in. So again, just go to our website, go to our recruiting page, and you'll see every place that we go, which is a lot. So I'm excited to hopefully see some of your students on the road or on the phone or virtually or anything like that. But please email, call, we're here for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much, Joseph. And I'm sure do hope that our students will reach out to you with more questions and you'll get to meet some of them in your recruiting events.
Of course, and best of luck to you. I look forward to seeing you in the courtroom.
Thank you. Me too. Just a few more years. Have a good weekend.
You too.